Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Adults, Children and Health Overview and Scrutiny panel on Thursday, the 12th of June. Our first item on the agenda this evening is the election of chair for the 2025-26 municipal year. Can I please ask the panel for any nominations for chair? Councillor Bond.
I'd like to propose Councillor Jodie Grove, please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that nomination? Councillor Davies. Are there any other nominations for the position of chair? Councillor Da Costa.
I'd like to nominate Devon Davies.
Is there a seconder for that nomination?
I will second it.
Councillor Da Costa. So whoever received two nominations for chair, we'll do a named vote on each motion. We'll take the first one, which is Councillor Grove to be elected as chair. That's been proposed by Councillor Bond and seconded by Councillor Davies. I'll just do a named vote on that. If you could please tell me if you're for, against, or abstaining on Councillor Grove to be chair. Councillor Baskerville.
For.
Councillor Bond.
For.
Councillor Da Costa.
Against.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Gosling.
Against.
Councillor Grove.
For.
And Councillor Shaw.
For.
So that's 5 for and 2 against. So that confirms Councillor Grove as chair for the municipal year. If we now move on to vice chair, will I please have nominations for vice chair? Councillor Grove.
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Councillor Devon Davies.
And do I have a seconder for that nomination? Councillor Shaw. And are there any other nominations for vice chair, please? No. Okay, that confirms Councillor Davies as vice chair. If we just take a quick pause to allow Councillor Grove to come up to the chair's seat, and we'll go through the formal introductions.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Adults, Children and Health Overview and Scrutiny panel on the 12th of June 2025. My name is Councillor Jodie Grove and I will be chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held in person via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participating in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live, and acknowledgement that after the meeting, it will continue to be available in the public domain. We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening. However, if it does, please may I ask that you leave in an orderly fashion and rendezvous across the road outside of the library next to the fountain. Firstly, it would be useful if all voting members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in this meeting and the role they will be undertaking. So as I said, my name is Councillor Jodie Grove and I'm the chair. Move to vice chair next.
Councillor Devon Davies, Vice Chair.
Councillor Simon Bond.
Councillor Clive Baskerville, voting member of the panel.
Councillor George Shaw, member of the panel.
Councillor Gosling, member of the panel. Councillor Carol Da Costa, voting member of the panel.
Lynn Lidster, Assistant Director for Commissioning and Finance in Adult Social Care.
Kate Concannon, Deputy Director for Adult Social Care.
Lynn Ferguson, Executive Director of Children's Services and Education.
Mark Bealey, Principal Democratic Services Officer for Overview and Scrutiny.
Thank you. And I believe we have two panel members online. So if we can get them to introduce themselves, that would be great.
Good evening, Tony Wilson, Director of Education for the Diocese of Oxford and a co-opted member of the panel.
And I'm Mark Jervis, a co-opted member of the panel on education matters.
Brilliant, thank you. I request that the meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I have invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking, if appropriate. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I am able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. I would also like to remind councillors that to improve our time and effectiveness as a committee, I would ask that you please limit the repetition of points or questions which have already been raised by others. Where possible, please put forward all new points or questions which you would like raised during your request to speak. We will now start on the agenda items, and do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, I received one apology from one of our co-optees, Paulina.
Thank you. And now moving on to declarations of interest. Have we received any prior to the meeting, or do we have any this evening? Fantastic. On to the minutes of the last meeting. Did anybody have any points to raise or amendments for those minutes, or are we all in agreement? Fantastic. So we're going to move on to the next agenda item, item 6, which is the Adult Social Care Performance 2024-25. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Lynn to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just do a very brief introduction to the report, and then Kate and I will be able to answer any questions. And I'm presenting tonight on behalf of Jessel Dockier, who's the Assistant Director for Systems, Performance and Communities, and she's on leave this week, so unable to present this. So this report introduces a new methodology with the intention to be a comprehensive overview of performance across adult social care. It incorporates the findings and update from Adult Social Care Outcomes Framework and the CQC inspection. It also incorporates the Q3 QAR report and financial performance, and also the strategic plan and updates on that for adult social care. So overall, we are seeing quite strong performance in many areas. The council successfully transferred all adult social care staff, operational staff and commissioning staff from Optalis back to the council in August 2024. We also migrated to the new Mosaic system, which is a new client record management system, which was a 2-year-long project and went live in February this year. And we also had good performance in adult social care outcomes frameworks, particularly around carer support and short-term outcomes for people. So whilst we have good performance overall, there are obviously some areas for challenge and areas where we have put some actions in place in order to improve performance. We've seen some user satisfaction decline. That's particularly in terms of our ask-off and the survey that goes out to people who we support. And that's detailed in the report, and the outcomes for last year are also detailed in there. But the project that we're particularly proud of and the achievements are around Mosaic, and that's the real success of the past few months. So implementing Mosaic, so our old client record management system, Paris, was in excess of 20 years old and was out of date, which had problems in terms of capturing data and financial information, and also for the workforce as well. It was a very old system. So we're very pleased that that is in. And while there are challenges and issues embedding that system in, overall, we are seeing the ability to have more accurate data. So in terms of the people who we support and length of time of assessment and so on, we're seeing that we've got financial information in there as well. So we've got real-time information about the money that is being committed. And it's much easier and a much smoother system for our workforce to use as well. So it's enabling the decisions that we make to be recorded accurately. And overall, people are using the system well. So that's just a very brief overview. And as I say, we're very happy to answer any questions about particular areas of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. So first up, we've got Councillor Baskerville.
Yes, thank you. How often has the methodology changed? Because it's obviously something which is quite important. I was just looking at some of the figures, particularly with there seems to be a drop in satisfaction with the some of the customers. Have other local authorities, you might have figures for this, you might not. Have when other local authorities change their methodology, do they also have similar reactions from customers about changes? Because I suspect people are creatures of habit, and if you do change something, like for instance Mosaic, although it might work well in terms of process, people don't always like change, and they take a while to catch up with things. How do you feel that might be one of the reasons why people are upset, or is that, or have you not delved that deep into finding out reasons?
I think it's difficult to say. So the methodology of collecting the ASCOF figures, which is Appendix 1, so that's a national framework. So all local authorities are subject to the same framework, and while there are some tweaks in the way the questions are asked or how they're asked, every local authority does the same thing. And a lot of these figures come from the survey. So it's surveying adults who've, a selection of the people in our community who receive support. So whilst the satisfaction ratings have gone down in terms of our ranking compared to other local authorities, it's still a satisfactory performance, and one that we do want to improve. If you look at satisfaction of people with learning disabilities and you pull that out as a specific cohort, that has actually improved slightly, but it's the overall performance that we're obviously looking at and we're interested in. In terms of the impact of Mosaic, people shouldn't see a difference in the way, because that's more of a back office system for the workforce, for our workforce to use. So that shouldn't have an impact on this. From what we can understand, we can put some rationale as to why there are some areas of performance that have dropped. And one of the things that we think is the key, and if you look at our complaints, that actually dovetails as well, is that, you know, the majority of complaints that we had were about communication, and when communication breaks down. And so we've had quite a transient workforce, and we've not had a very stable workforce for the past few years. So we think that in terms of communication with people, setting expectations, and just the change in staff from one person to another will have an effect on our performance and the way that customers interact with us. So that was one of the key reasons really why we've moved back into RBWM. So in Optalis, because of the terms and conditions that were less favourable to other local authorities, so in terms of overall pay, sick pay, pension, and so on, we weren't able to be part of the competitive market in terms of attracting staff. So having moved back into RBWM and have reviewed some of our terms and conditions, and we continue to do that, then the plan is for that to enable us to have a more stable workforce, and in turn then improve communication and improve customer services to the people we support. I don't know if you want to say something, Kate, about the workforce strategy that you're leading on.
Yes, so I've already met with the Local Government Association, who've been supporting us with our CQC improvement journey. And one of the key priorities really was the workforce strategy. So we've had some meetings with them in how we're going to do that in a co-productive way with our staff. And we've got some sessions booked in for August to meet with our staff to look at the strategy about how we can retain staff. I think we've done quite well in recruitment over the last 2 or 3 months. So now we really want to focus on retaining staff as well. So it's going to look very different, hopefully, next year. We also need to think about why people aren't satisfied with us. So there is the question of next year's survey. Are we able to add another question for them to kind of explain and describe a bit more, so that we do get underneath and understand what it is that people aren't as satisfied about? So that's another one for the survey next year. So
my follow-up question about, to some extent, with communication and retaining staff, because I think those are two key things. And it sounds like you're working on the communication level, and you're aware that that is an issue. So it'd be interesting this time next year to see if that you have actually managed to solve or partially solve that issue, and also hopefully get the levels of staff up and retention as well, because I think certainly if you're relying on people, caring for you, you need the familiar faces, don't you? And the constant churn of people probably doesn't help, I suspect. So that'd be interesting to find out if there's any change in that next year. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Devon Davies.
Hello. So just looking at the table at the bottom, and obviously what caught my eye is the overall satisfaction from 4th to 19th. See, the explanation is given in 5.62. 92%, 85% doesn't sound too bad, to be honest, but I'm going to ask questions anyway. I see that the reason given is a focus on sustainable expenditure, which sounds like polite for you don't have enough money. Is a lack of money going to cause problems in the future?
I think what's happened possibly previously is that packages of care that have supported people have been quite expensive, and we're now looking at more sustainable ways of supporting people. So we're looking at how we can maximise the use of the money. So it's about being affordable, sustainable. Some people may have been dissatisfied because their package of care has been changed, but actually what we found is that people are actually finding that having for example, 4 calls a day to your home is quite a lot of calls, a lot of people coming into your home. And so if we've looked at those people perhaps having 3 calls a day instead, and I think initially people were obsessed about that, but actually it's how you use those calls and what do we have in our communities to support people in between the calls as well. And so we haven't had complaints around reduction in care packages, but I do wonder if that has led to some kind of dissatisfaction, because it's the unknown and people worry about their loved ones. They worry about what support they're going to have. And we don't want to stop people having support at all, but the changes in the way that we're kind of supporting people is different. So I think that may have accounted for that section.
Okay, so it might just be a reaction to this brief change and not an indication of a trend. That's good. One other little question. See the use of Power BI. I'm a bit of a maths geek, and I'd love to be able to see what kind of statistics are going on there. It's not really a question, but if I could, I'm not sure if I could look at it or not, just out of interest.
Yes, so I think we are planning on doing a session for councillors to show them how our tech is working once we've got a kind of presentation together. So it won't have individuals details and things on, but we were planning on doing a session for councillors with the magic notes as well as the Power BI. So we'd really like to see you there.
Yeah, I'm a computer programmer with a degree in physics, so that fills me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that's gone into this report. Obviously, there's elements that are good and there are elements that are for improvement. I was quite disappointed to see that we're still in needs improvement with the CQC, but we're so close to coming out of that. what low-lying fruits can we mop up really quickly to take us over that threshold?
So I think you're absolutely right. You know, we were 1 point away from being good, but we haven't had an opportunity to go back to CQC. So at the moment, there isn't a structured process for CQC coming back in. And we were the first year. And I think last year they probably got round to about between 15 and 20 local authorities. And if you think there's 152 of us, then the initial tranche of inspections is going to be quite some time away. However, I do know that Kevin is meeting with our regional improvement partner, and every month he meets and goes through the actions. But at the moment, there isn't a mechanism for us to actually be redetermined to a different priority, to a different category. I think we have done a lot of what we said we were going to do. So, you know, one of the actions was to have a permanent management team, and we've now got that in place. The other thing that they wanted was to see that we'd actually implemented Mosaic and that was working. And we have done that, and it is by and large, like I said, it does have teething troubles, but we are getting around now. So I think a lot of what we said and a lot of the improvements that we needed to make in that action plan, we have actually done. But there isn't, as I know, a mechanism at the moment, a formal mechanism to move up.
No, we would need to re-inspection, and there's still quite a few local authorities who haven't had their first inspection yet, so that will take time. And I don't think we've really been given a timeline as to when we can expect that, but I think these monthly meetings with the support that they provide is really important, that keeps us on track. And also thinking about the workforce strategy, that's being done as part of the response to the CQC too. I think having a permanent solid workforce was one of the key drivers really for getting us over that, because of the improved communication, the investment in our staff around improving practice and really getting to know our local area. So, you know, when we have locums here, they don't necessarily know what the community offers. I mean, there's such a rich community offer here as well. So, yeah, I think that, and with our data and us knowing ourselves are the key areas. So I would be quite confident if they were to come back in 6 months' time, we would be able to have a much better outcome.
Can I ask another question? Okay, so that's really good. And if they don't come for a couple of years, we might even get outstanding if we're going to be very ambitious. So I was going to ask about the permanent workforce, because I know that's been an issue that we've looked at as long as I've been a councillor, which is since 2019. And every year we hear about the amount of agency we're paying for and the lack of continuity. So the driver now to get that in place is the fact that we've now, as a council, been CQC'd, and it's part of our development plan. So we can expect to see that happen now, not just be talked about, but see that happening and is happening. Is that correct?
It is, and in fact, we're starting the Virginia recruitment video. We're filming next week. So we're going to have a real push on the campaign. We've also made sure that the terms and conditions are aligned. So we've got harmonisation of terms and conditions. We've got, and that's a real driver for me. There is always a place for locums. However, you can't beat having the permanent workforce. So that was one of the things that really drew me to here, was that was going to be my priority, is about getting the workforce, because without that, the other things don't fall into place as well. So we've got the recruitment video that we're starting to do. We've already started recruiting permanent staff because of the better terms and conditions, and word is out there that we're not the poor relation to our neighbours. I think we've got a really caring and supportive set of teams across our service, and people know that. So I think it's important that we get that message out there too. So I feel really positive about it in regards of getting people in and growing our own. So we've paused the apprenticeship scheme this year because of bringing Optilis back in, and there was lots of churn and changes. But now with a more solid management team, we're able to reinstate our growing our own apprentices. We've got a cohort approach to the ASYE programme, so that the newly qualified will be coming in and receiving support, not just from the principal social worker and their team, but actually as a group. And they'll be having a really in-depth ASYE programme. We're joining with Achieving for Children and doing some learning lessons and working together with them, with newly qualified as well, so having that as part of the programme. And then after they've newly qualified social workers have done their first year, we're going to then have a development year, which is then looking at practice education training, best interest assessor training, which it really helps with retention. It also helps making sure that we're doing our DOLS assessments and addressing those areas as well. So, yeah.
So that's great, and I think there's probably a lot of learning to come from Achieving for Children, because they went with the changing how they recruited social workers there. So there's a lot to be learnt there. And I just want to make a plug for your apprenticeship, that you do remember our care leavers and put them quite high on your recruitment. Thank you.
We can go to Councillor George Shaw, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I've just got a few questions around certain sections of this kind of together. So we've had a seemingly quite meteoric rise in proportion of carers who receive self-directed support, but we've only received a very, very slight, if negligible, in proportion of people who use services receive self-directed support. Why is there a difference? Is this targeting, or is there something to be learned there?
We introduced direct payments for carers in the past few years, so that's had an impact on the performance. So we've always had direct payments as long as for the past 20 years, but the take-up of direct payments isn't that good in our local authority, and it is one of the things that we do need to improve on. So last year we've got a carers programme, and we were successful in getting some funding, some external funding, some government funding, in order to do a comprehensive carers programme that my colleague Jessel heads up, and we've got a carers worker as well. So we have had some targeted work with carers, and we do offer a one-off direct payment annually for carers, for them to spend on respite and things to help them to keep going in their caring journey for respite purposes. We do need to do the same for everyone who we support. So when we came back from Optilis, we went out to advert for a direct payments worker, and that sits in my team, so it goes across the department. And she started about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So she's just coming up to speed, and we're developing a work plan for her. So one of the reasons that we weren't successful in attracting people or persuading people or to have direct payments is that we didn't have a support mechanism for our workforce. So and with the moving nature of our workforce and the locums, then our policies and procedures, you need everyone to understand it's quite complicated. So now that we've got our development worker in place, she will support the rest of the workforce in supporting our residents to be able to take up direct payments. And then there are the mechanisms, so the kind of infrastructure around direct payments that we need to build as well. So most local authorities now have prepaid cards, so that people can, so the mechanism, the payment for direct payments is easier. So at the moment, we still require people to have a completely separate bank account that we can audit. And there are other ways using technology that we can still have the audit that we need without causing, overdue admin burden on the people who we support, who you know, don't need that level of admin on top of everything that they've got to deal with. So it will be a programme, but we have got that worker in place. She's on a 2-year contract, so she's with us for 2 years. So that's going to be her focus to increase the level of direct payments.
Following up on that, if we've done this targeted communication with carers, how come we're getting a large proportion of carers are saying that they're finding it hard to find information, that they're not being included or consulted? Yeah, you know, the care reported quality of life is so high. We seem to be having this juxtaposition of extremely good and not very good at all. How do they work together?
So the way the Ask Off survey works is it's almost 12 months behind. So the figures that get reported in kind of in summer last year, so in summer 24, that survey would have been done in 2023, back end of 23-24. So that takes longer to come through than the actual the figures themselves, because the figures are what we report. So in terms of so by the time people were receiving the survey and filling that in, it may not have been at the same time as those numbers were increasing. However, I think there's a very valid point that we do need to improve the information and advice that we give. And, you know, one of the focuses that we need to look at is around our website. So we've recently signed up to the Carers Hub. So that's Carers UK National, and they provide a kind of a widget, as it were, to go onto your website to link to information and advice. So that's one thing that we will be doing, but I think it's a fair challenge that we do need to improve that advice offer for everyone who we support, not just only through the website, but again in terms of that continuous and stable workforce.
Time for that widget improvement to the website, is that?
I'm not entirely sure because that's Jessel's area of work, but I can find out and I can feed that back to you.
I've actually got a link to the Carers Hub now. So it's Carers Week this week. So it's a really timely question in that regard. And I know that I've been sharing the link to the Carers Hub this week myself on LinkedIn and things. So that is in place. And the other thing is that as part of the extra funding that Lynn had referred to around the Carers project, we're also looking at a Ask Sarah, which is in the report, which is to help people to look at what supports they can have and practical supports around the home and piece of equipment, small piece of equipment, things like that. So when that's going live, we'll also be looking at the website generally, so that it is more accessible for people. And we accept not everybody can get onto a website, so we still have a leaflet with lots of details around our Home First and our early help offer. And that will be going out, that's in the library, it can get handed out in the town hall. We also want to make sure that it's in doctors' surgeries and places like that too. So, okay.
We say the difference in these numbers is due to results being 12 months behind. 12 months from now, are we expecting these numbers to go up in line with everything else, or do we think there are other factors that we can anticipate?
I would hope that we would see some improvement next year.
Thank you. Councillor Bond.
Thank you. Reading your report and the CQC one, there's quite a lot of mention of the Mosaic system, which is just coming in, and how it provides much better management information. And I wondered if there are other advantages to it, for example, financial, where people are expected to make a contribution to their own care, does it make sure that's requested and collected? And does it help with productivity as well? And then the other area is carers, where the questions are mostly new. As you say, it's Carers Week this week, and there was a good sort of carers fair, as it were, at the Braywick Leisure Centre earlier this week, which I thought was helpful. Of course, the problem is, particularly if it's an elderly person, is you don't think of yourself as a carer until something happens, and then you're in crisis. So, ideally, you'd want to think about it in advance. And obviously, I know that if you want to lead a good life as you get older, that important things are looking after yourself physically, keeping mentally active, and an active social life. The one thing that somebody mentioned was emergency planning. So you actually sort of think, what would I do if the person who's been getting my shopping suddenly went into hospital and they could no longer do it, that kind of thing, to think those things through, and you'd probably, as a result, make a better job of it. But I was a bit puzzled by the answers to some of the questions, particularly it's called Measure 1E, Overall Satisfaction of Carers with Social Services, and that was high. That was a national ranking 7th, and it was above average. But then penultimate one down the bottom, I think it's 5A2, proportion of carers who reported their, I think somewhere down the bottom anyway, it's the carers who feel, here, a proportion of carers who report they have been included or consulted in discussion about the person they care for. It's 3B. And that was very low. And I thought, if you don't think you're being included or consulted, but you still have a high opinion of social services, that seems odd to me. So I know they're national questions, they're not your questions, but I'm just kind of itching to get behind those kind of discrepancies, if you like.
So there's differences. I think this question here, where it has a, have you been included, that's in the assessment or the review for the person that they care for, and that's separate to a carer's assessment. So we'd actually, although we can do them at the same time, people have their own assessments. So I think what's that telling us is that when we're doing the review or the assessment for the cared for person, the carer doesn't feel consulted enough. And I think that's something that is around practice, and that's something we're going to work with our staff in around making sure that the cares, when we're doing reviews and assessments, that the carers are talked to, listened to, also the care providers, and just triangulating that everybody who's involved in that person is involved with the review. And it may be that, if people are concentrating on the cared for person, that they haven't been necessarily taking on the carers' views. But with the increase of carers' assessments, then that's where the carers' satisfaction may be coming from, and that the carers' offer has improved as well. So,
but the benefits besides the better management information.
yes, so Mosaic is actually, when we talked about contingency planning or emergency planning, we've got a whole section on that. So when somebody has a care and support plan, there's a whole section on here for the practitioners to fill out what would happen if there were, if situation changed. And that's where we expect to, when we're quality assuring care plans and what have you, we expect to see a plan. And that might be, what would happen if my husband went into hospital and I had no one to care for me. It may even be down to what happens to my pets if I had to go into hospital, because that's another thing that adult social care, we have a duty to protect people's property if they go into hospital or residential care. And often, we would be thinking, well, what happens about the pets? So thinking ahead and having that planning is really important. And again, it's another practice area around getting social workers and OTs to talk about that with people. We think about parents who are perhaps getting older, who've got adults who need support, and thinking about longer term planning there too. So there's still work to be done on that, but Mosaic does give us that opportunity to do it. And it also allows us to see whether how much people's financial contribution are and what have you, and that financial assessments have been made all in one place. So it's really, really helpful in that way.
Thank you. Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you. So I just wanted to do a little bit of clarification, because I don't think everybody watching this now or in the future may fully understand. So just when we were talking about recruitment and having the less of the agency and the recruitment, that would be within the social workers, is that correct? And our carers delivering care in people's homes are still outsourced, and are we still using, like we did when we had those workshops and we discussed loads of stuff? Is that still as it was?
Yes, absolutely. So that's still as it was. So when Optalis, when colleagues returned from Optalis to RBWM, so there we're talking about social workers, occupational therapists, so operational staff, people who do assessments, care plans, and all the commissioning staff as well, and project staff. So they're back in RBWM. What stayed in Optalis? So Optalis still works with us as a provider organisation. So Optalis still provides short-term services and reablement, so intermediate care when people come out of hospital. It also provides support at Lady Elizabeth House for older people, and a lot of the supported living and residential care in the borough for people with learning disabilities. Supported employment, the day centres, so that's all still Optalis. And then as you say about the care that people receive in their own homes, so domiciliary care, that's still provided through our dynamic purchasing system and through the now 13 providers that we have on that who go in. So that's not changing. So that was a 5-year contract, I think about 2.5 years ago now. So yeah, so that's still in operation.
So that was my understanding. So
yeah, that's right.
I just had a question as well about the re-enablement team, because when that first started, it was really, really successful and we had good results, and that seems to have dropped a little bit. Is there a reason for that, or are we going to bring that in-house? I would just like to see how we might make improvements on that, because staying out of hospital for 91 days after an admission is a really important statistic on long-term outcomes for an individual.
So whilst this is a great example of hitting the target and missing the point, so this is a nationally collected piece of data, and so looks at intermediate care. Now, before we had the Home First service, everyone who came out of hospital would have had a period of intermediate care, one way or another, either a bedded or that's if they needed support coming out of hospital. So everybody needed support would either have care from STS&R or in a bedded facility. And then, so it was the care that was provided by STS&R. So 91 days after somebody came out of hospital, people would get a phone call, or if we were still in touch, are they still at home? Have they had a readmission, and so on? So, and 100% of people who would go through that service in that way. When we put Home First in, so Home First is a step now before reablement, because we recognise that reablement is quite tough when you're coming out of hospital and you've not slept well, you've not eaten well, and so on. So Home First is that step before reablement, to make sure that you are ready and able to take on that reablement service. Now, some people don't need to then go on to reablement. So if you look at the 100% of people who were surveyed or counted previously, you would get the people who were, you know, quite well when they came out of hospital. And then you'd have people, so going along the line, you'd have them. So you see where I'm going? The cohort now of people who have that reablement service are the ones who need it most, or the ones who have more re-optimization to do. So the cohort has changed, and therefore the number, so the actual numbers have not changed. So between Home First and the reablement service, it's a good service and we have really good outcomes. And that's why we've kept Home First, because it just provides that settling people back home for an extended period. That particular set of data is not going to be collected nationally anymore because of the flaws nationally. You know, and it can provide quite a perverse incentive in a way. But in essence, the service hasn't changed and the outcomes haven't changed, but it's just the cohort that we count are people who are more the people who need more reablement and therefore might go back into hospital for something completely different. But
No, it makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the panel? Brilliant. Well, that question that Councillor Da Costa asked was one that I pulled out on the 2D one, so that's been answered brilliantly. Thank you. I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to talk to us this evening. And it's really clear that even though we're doing brilliantly and there are areas for improvement, the team are on it and they know what those areas are, and everyone's working tirelessly to bring those improvements. So thank you. If nothing else on that one, we're going to move on to the Kinship Care Report. So we have Natalie joining us online to talk us through this. Over to you, Natalie.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. So I think you probably got the document that was shared around our update on kinship care and what we're doing in Windsor Maidenhead specifically. So this is in response to the government guidances, the DfE guidance around kinship, the strategy and other subliminal documents that came with this. And we've outlined all of those in the document. So it has the national framework and then the strategy that came from that. So in response to this, we've collated with our family, so working with our connected carers, our special guardians, and the community to understand where our gaps were to fulfill the requirements of this new strategy, which outlined 6 areas, and then the foundation's practice guidance. The practice guide was implemented in response to this to help local authorities to think about our next steps, and they also came up with 6 recommendations as well. And so we looked at what we needed to do, what we do really well, and what we needed to fill gaps with, and how we would respond to this. And from that, we have developed our own kind of next steps and areas of focus. And we're pleased to announce that the local offer, which is one of the major kind of strategy focus points, has been launched and is available on our website, and we are going to continue to grow that. It's a live document that we'll continue to add to as community groups grow, as more information comes available to us around the available resources for informal and formal kinship arrangements in the Windsor Maidenhead area. And so that is now live, and we're going to continue that work. We're bringing post special guardianship support back into Windsor Maidenhead, and we're going to be starting that process from next month. So we're really pleased to in the area, and those special guardians that live outside the area but are caring for children that were Windsor Maidenhead responsibility. And so we're really looking forward to kind of doing that piece of work. We've got lots of changes around supporting our front door in identifying informal kinship arrangements and the support services that will be available to them already or in the future. We're also doing work in identifying possible kinship arrangements for children much earlier on, so that early intervention, and making sure that we are considering alternative options of children having to come into mainstream fostering, and that they can either go to a family or friend first through a kind of a process that we have in place, a national process of viability assessments. So we're commencing that. We do that piece of work within the fostering and kinship team, and we're really strengthening the conversations of family group conferencing, family network meetings, and pulling all of those resources together much earlier on in that child's journey from the front door. And what we're hoping to do is lower the number of children coming into mainstream fostering that don't need to, who have alternative family options available to them. Did you want me to go through line by line, or do we jump into questions? I'm happy to go with whatever the committee would like.
Is there a consensus? Have people got questions, or would you like? Yeah, my view is line by line, everyone should have read it, so that might be a little bit laborious. So should we go to questions? Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you. I've looked at this offer and all of the educational and support that you've got for kinship fosterers, and it's excellent. There's just one thing that's not there, and it may be because it's somewhere else, but I need to ask about it because it's what people are asking me. And that is emotional support for the foster carers, for the kinship foster carers. I've had a few of them approach me and say that they're feeling very isolated, and I know it's across the board, but the need for respite care to give them a break and just somewhere where they can get that emotional support is something that they're desperate for. And I don't see it there. It might be somewhere else. It may be something we add to it. And then I just have one other quick question, just out of my own curiosity. If you are a kinship fosterer, do you need to have a spare room?
So no, that's really helpful. Okay, so kinship, because now the national strategy has informal and formal, it does depend on the arrangement to what services are available. And that's something that obviously the Department for Education are working on. And I know that they've just done an announcement on a further budget, which could see an increase in the offers that we have for informal. There is also going to be a pilot that the DFE, so the Department for Education and Foundations, have just closed the bidding for, which is going to include informal and formal arrangements, which will focus on that emotional support. Because for informal arrangements, so those are arrangements that often we don't actually know about, but might be looking for additional support services, but there's not actually a need for children's services to be involved. We are going to have more and more services available. Some are at a cost, but what we know from emotional services is that if you're on benefits or you're receiving additional services, though the cost of that arrangement or support is either lowered or actually taken away. So it then becomes a free service. So we are kind of adding and increasing that. We are trying to be broad, but at sometimes also provide information in our actual local area. For all kinship carers, whether it's informal or formal, there are community support groups that I would highly recommend people reaching out to. And you can find that information on the charity website, Kinship Compass. And they have local groups where it's run usually by kinship carers, and that's a really great support. So whether it's informal or formal, I highly recommend people reaching out to those services, and there should be one in your local area. If there isn't, I know Kinship Compass, the charity, is working very hard in kind of building that up in each local area. For our kinship foster carers, so those are our connected carers who have a child that continues to be looked after, the emotional support service is slightly different because we have the emotional health team within children's services that are linked to us. And we have our systemic support therapists as well, who work directly with our connected carers. With our special guardianship carers, it depends on the situation to whether or not they can access the adoption and special guardianship support fund additional financial services as well. So there is a few different avenues. It does, unfortunately, at this time, nationally depend on the arrangement that you're in. Is it informal? Is it formal? And if it's formal, is it the responsibility of Windsor Maidenhead? So do they live in this area and or care for a child that is of Windsor Maidenhead Council responsibility? But we will continue to add to the local offer, and I can take that your query around not having enough of that information on our local offer away today, and we can catch up. We're catching up tomorrow as a team to discuss this, so I'll take that away. And then in relation to your question around the bedroom, because a child over the age of 3 is required to have their own room, then in theory, yes, they do have to. What we're doing is working with housing, we're working with other groups to think about how we can support kinship carers who might not have a spare room but would want to care for someone that they are connected to. And that's something that we're still working on. Obviously, housing have their own complexities and their availability. So it's how we can be creative and support those families. We're in the very early days of that process, so we can continue to give you an update on that.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. My question's around the main or first recommendation that we're to offer kinship carers specialist support to learn about, navigate and access support they're entitled to. The current local offer give information, but it doesn't seem, I wouldn't define it as specialist. It almost seems, I don't want to say generic, but it shows we show access, we've got a range of training opportunities, things like that, and that's all good. When I was looking at charities kind of discussing these recommendations, they were discussing, what was it, dedicated kinship family support workers and caseworkers. Do we have people dedicated to this role, or is it a more kind of general roles that this is just being included in within?
Yeah, so in relation to your question around training and additional support services, one of the complexities that we all face is that kinship has never been a priority in this country, and it's never really had the focus and the lights put on it like it has now. So we're in a situation where training organisations, services, even myself I do training as well, we're adapting the resources we have to support kinship and have that focal point, because it is very different to other arrangements. Mainstream foster carers come into their journey very differently to kinship carers. When you think of a formal arrangement for kinship, they could get a phone call and say, police have attended, the child needs care tonight. And they may not have even known that the family were in a situation that needed that level of assistance. And that's obviously something we're trying to navigate with our early intervention work. But they are thrown into this journey very, very differently. And so we have to support them in the way that they need it. So it feels very much more focused on the individual needs of that household, that child, and that kinship carer than it might do in other arrangements. But that's definitely something we're working on and we're very aware. In relation to the support services, so for formal, we do have our fostering and kinship team, which is made up of social workers, and we work with those kinship carers. They're allocated as part of that, and we do that journey with them. And our next kind of stage of our work has been supporting early help support teams, the front door, in recognising informal arrangements, supporting them with different range of services, and having link workers within our own team who can help those workers navigate this new system.
Thank you. Councillor Gosling.
Yes, my question is, how long have we been doing this kinship? How long has it been running? Because, I mean, it's a great idea, and obviously families are very important in the whole of the social services. And I'm reading here that there were 24 children in care, but they're not now. So how many have we got in care in the Royal Borough at the moment in the kinship section?
Again, it kind of depends if we're talking about informal and formal.
Right.
In the way of the government guidances, informal has become more of a focal point around the support offer that we have. So that's definitely something that's changed, and we're obviously working around that. When it comes to more like formal arrangements, the special guardianship order process, child arrangement orders, or what they used to be residence orders, and being a connected foster carer, have been around for a very long time. But what the difference is we're really focusing on the minutiae and the difference that arrangement is, with the example that I just gave you. It's how they come into this and the supports that they receive. And the difference, if you think of a grandparent taking on the care of their grandchild, it might seem really simple. But if they're having to navigate a degree of separation from that parent who is their own child, and they have this desire to still help their child, but actually their focus is now their grandchild, and they're having to put in boundaries and do things that a grandparent shouldn't have to do because of the situation. It's a very different identity that they now hold, and the stigma that it can be of caring for a child that otherwise community might think should be with their parent. And so that's a really complex field to navigate for those families. In the way of current arrangement and how many children we have in connected care, I can double check while we're talking, but I think we're at about 30 children. We also have, because there is the possibility of Regulation 24, which is the immediate care, so that's that temporary care, our numbers can fluctuate based on that as well through the month.
Thank you. Councillor Bond.
Thank you. I read about half of this report, with the mindset I was reading a technical report before it occurred to me that between the ages of 8 months and 13 years, I was largely brought up with kinship care, what you term informal kinship care. So it's certainly been around for a long time, in my case, due to family circumstances. And I'd say I'm very grateful to my grandmother and aunts and uncles who stepped in a way they probably never thought they would have to. And I think it's good that there is a focus on kinship care because it can be very valuable. I can see that in some cases it's quite challenging if perhaps you have a child with particular needs. And following on what Councillor De Costa was saying about emotional support, I think it must be quite important for people who are undertaking kinship care, whether it's informal or formal, that they can talk to somebody and just feel they're being heard and listened to. So just like to endorse that. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think definitely now informal kinship is getting more of a focus than it has before. And I think we will continue to expand that, whether that's just in our borough or nationally, because I definitely think that informal or private arrangements have gone under the radar for many years, and those families have just kind of got on with it because that's what they do as a family. But yeah, it is good to see that there are community groups out there, and that support offer is growing and growing as we continue on.
Thank you. Natalie, just linked to that last point that you made, I'm sure there are a number of residents who do have informal kinship caring arrangements in place, but may not know that there's all this amazing support available to them. Are we doing a communications plan? How are we communicating this to the wider resident population?
Yeah, so what we've started with is, I guess, a soft launch of the local offer to get some further guidance from people. And doing these sorts of meetings is helping me think about, do we need to add anything before we do an actual comms from the council? So that is our next stage, and we'll be doing that in the coming weeks of end of this month, and that will go out to the residents. We're also, you know, as we do with our mainstream fostering, we go to events and community fairs. And so we are talking more and more about kinship in those spaces as well, and just letting people know. We also have the support of our virtual school. And so the schools are doing a lot more work around identifying those families and thinking about what supports might be available to them. And then part of that goal will be to support families to look at our local offer, to access the community groups that I mentioned before, and then continue to have that conversation. So I think it's one of those things where it's quite a focal point, and we're going to try and keep that on the agenda.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. And yeah, I second what everybody else has said. This is a really exciting development and such an incredible thing that we're doing within the borough. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is the social care transformation. So I'll hand over to Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a very brief update on where we are with the social care transformation. You may remember from a cabinet decision last year that we brought in an external company called Newton to do a diagnostic of children's services and adult services. And the focus really of that diagnostic was, how can we truly transform our people services, our children's services and adult services, and make efficiencies at the same time? So that piece of work took place, and we got the report earlier this year. They did what we call a phase 1 diagnostic report, and we have considered that report in full. We have decided not to move forward with phase 2, which is the implementation of that work with Newton, because in our view, it doesn't represent best value for our council. So we've made that decision. However, the issue is we've still got the work to do in both adults and children's services. And so we are both currently working through alternative options for delivery based on the phase 1 diagnostic report and the conclusions of that report. So we are anticipating we're going to be in a position to be able to go to Cabinet on the 1st of July with our view about direction of travel and how we believe we can deliver that work without it being Newton. So it really is just to update the panel on that position, and happy to take any questions, although obviously there's a lot of commercial sensitivity involved in this, so I'll probably not be able to go into details here, but certainly if you've got any questions about direction of travel, I'm happy, and my colleagues in adult services, I'm sure, are happy to try and answer some questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Kate, I see that you're in the list to speak. Was there something you wanted to add at this point? No. Oh, no worries. Thank you. Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you. So this is going to Cabinet at the beginning of next month. So will it come back to us as an overview and scrutiny at some points that we can scrutinise what's happening with this direction of travel? Because obviously you felt that phase 2 that was presented to you was not cost or best value. So as an overview and scrutiny panel, would we be able to see what will be better value, or even be able to make a comparison?
Yes, thank you. If we were sure about our options at this moment in time, we would be discussing them here this evening. We're still working that through because that decision is still, you know, in its infancy really. So I think I would be very happy to put this on a future agenda item. Obviously, it would be more of a, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What impact is it having? That sort of conversation, but very happy to bring that back here, and I'm sure Adult Services would feel the same. Thank you.
Just one quick question from me, and I appreciate that you're still working through options, so you may not be able to answer this. But given that we won't be using an external provider to deliver, do you think that will stretch timescales for delivery or put any undue pressure on resource that therefore might mean that there are additional delays for delivering those improvements?
Number of options we're looking at, as you can imagine. One of those options is that we deliver the work ourselves in-house. And one of the other options might be that we do bring in some external support. And those conversations are happening at the moment. We are very mindful of timescales. We're very mindful of the savings that we have to achieve. And we want to be able to be in a position where we can move ahead very quickly with any of the options that we choose. So I know for Adult Services, for example, there are some savings attached to that work this year.
Yes.
That isn't the case for Children's, but next year, you know, we both will need to have everything up and running, because that will be quite a significant year for us. So the answer is we're working that through. We're very mindful of timescales, and we're hoping we can get that work kicked off as soon as possible, however we choose to do it.
Thank you. Any further questions from the panel? Nope. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that update. Okay, so that just leaves us this evening to consider the works programme. Is there anything that anybody wanted to highlight in relation to the existing works programme? Councillor Da Costa.
Wondered if we could look at the impact of the removal of the AQMAs on health, because it wasn't going to be heard in this panel. So I just wondered if we could look at the impact on health, which does affect this panel.
Yep, I don't see why we can't make a note of that and take that back to see whether we can assess the outcomes from the work that's been done via the PLACE panel. So yeah, we'll take that one back.
And then you've got the one that Lynn suggested for the forward, which is great, which I was going to.
Yes, yeah, assuming that one has been noted. Thank you. Councillor Davies.
So on our last meeting, Lynn Perkins suggested a scrutiny session could be held on child exploitation, but I don't see them a work programme. So, and look, if you look at our minutes on the meeting of Monday 24th, at the bottom, Lynn Ferguson suggested a scrutiny session will be held on child exploitation, particularly as there had been a lot in the press and it was top of issue. I'm pretty sure we said we'd want to look at that, but it hasn't made it into a work programme. Yeah.
I'll need to look at the date, but there was a session here, Mark. You got it may be the one before last.
I'm going to say, Councillor Davies, was there something from the last meeting where that was discussed, that there was a follow-up that was meant to be added to the works programme? Okay, so maybe we will go back and look at the minutes and we will figure that one out.
Yeah, yeah.
It was delivered as part of a report from Danny Gom. Yeah, yeah. It was, yeah, and it was Danny that delivered the information on it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was there anything else that anybody wanted to raise? We've got a few items that have been suggested but not yet programmed. Is anybody keen to get those programmed onto future meetings? The 9th of October looks pretty full, but after that, Councillor Da Costa, I can see here that there's a review of mental health provision. If you'd like us to put that in potentially for the January meeting. Fantastic. Councillor Baskerville.
Yeah, on the first item about outdoor advertising bus stops, I was just wondered if there's any scope, because it's recent changes in the bus stops certainly happened in my ward, where there's a temporary bus stop. First of all, would there be a bus? Ultimately, would there a new bus shelter be placed there where the?
Sorry, councillor Baskerville, is this on the bus shelters?
I think it's on the cabinet.
Oh, it's on the cabinet forward plan, sorry, not in the work schedule.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, that's all right, it was just confusing me.
Oh, I got ahead of myself.
Sorry, please do carry on, sorry, I interrupted you there.
Yeah, sorry, it's the first item on the forward plan. It's just trying to ascertain about the bus stops. As I say, there are temporary bus stops I expect not just in my ward, but in other wards as well. And is there scope for making some of these new bus stops have bus shelters and therefore greater scope for advertising there?
Advertising for the work that we've been talking about this evening?
Well, no, there is outdoor advertising on bus stops.
I think, would this come more under the Place Directorate rather than this panel?
Yeah, right. Just to confirm to the panel as well, so we've got our panel work programme, which is the first work programme in that agenda item, and then I've also attached a cabinet forward plan. So those are all the items which the cabinet are going to look at over the coming months, of which the bus stops is one of them. It's just so that panel members across all three panels can see what's going on in the cabinet forward plan, and if they want to raise them, for them we can scrutinise. So it's a really good suggestion, Councillor Baskerville, but it would probably fall under the place or potentially corporate panels rather than this one in terms of scrutinising that decision at overview and scrutiny.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you. I can't remember when we had the paper come to panel. I think it may be in the last meeting that we had. And there was an element in it that looked at the outcomes of both education and health in areas of deprivation. And I just wondered if we could have an update on that, maybe later in the plan, so that we've got some time to look at how we're working to improve those outcomes, and just have an update on that, because we had the evidence that it was there, but we now need to look at what we're doing about it.
Yeah, good idea. Okay. Sorry, was there something else, Councillor? No, okay, brilliant. Well, if there's nothing else to be raised, thank you very much for everyone attending this evening and all those updates, and we'll call this meeting to a close.